This is my second podcast, written during the COVID-19 pandemic, and to give an idea about some films which might be watched during the lockdown. Shoot 'em ups might have started with Die Hard, now famous and virtually an annual Christmas event. It has been followed by many others, so here is Die Hard and 4 others which struck me as a watch, even though most of them have been unloved on general release. So back to the original Shoot 'em up, which was Die Hard, filmed in 1988. 1988, I hear you say? How could that be any good? Well, if by any chance you've ignored one of its many repetitions on terrestrial TV, make sure you catch it next time. The film is set in the usual format for shoot 'em ups, requiring a lot of bad guys to be locked into an environment with a good guy or some good guys. In the case of Die Hard, the villain, Hans Gruber, played by Alan Rickman, invades the new Nakatomi building with a team of bad men, at a time when the Japanese chief executive of the company is holding a party. He has a plan and fully expects a number of things to be done out there in the plaza, including, in the end, the intervention of the FBI. The one thing he has not considered is a well-trained policeman inside the building. So step forward John McClane, played by Bruce Willis, who just happens to be there to attempt a reconciliation with his wife, who is the HR chief of the company. John is in the lavatory when he hears the invasion taking place, and so as soon as the opportunity occurs, disappears into the unoccupied upper floors of the building. And it is from there that he takes on the terrorists, soon terminating one, giving him a machine gun and a radio. There is light relief. With the radio he contacts a policeman who has more or less accidentally ended up outside, and who acts as an intermediary between McClane and some inept FBI men who think they will sort it all out, and whose efforts result in some spectacular events. There is also a newsman who manages to reveal via TV broadcasts the name of the policeman and the fact that his wife is in the building. This gives Gruber advantage, and by then he has proved that he is capable of killing people without mercy. I remember quite well my first viewing of Die Hard, idly sticking a videotape into our machine to see what my sons had hired, and I was immediately drawn into the drama. There have been a number of sequels of varying qualities, possibly the best being Die Hard with a Vengeance, the third film. The Spanish like to title their films in a way which gives an indication of the content. There it is known as Jungla or Jungla de Cristal, because it involves a lot of glass. But the message is, if you have not seen it, catch it next time. We move on to Under Siege in 1992. Under Siege is a Steven Seagal vehicle from quite early in his career. Critics have been dismissive of Seagal films, but this outing was the recipient of positive reviews. There might be other Seagal films out there worth a watch, but I don't know about them. Anyway, Under Siege is a film which takes in the voyage of the battleship USS Missouri from Pearl Harbor to San Francisco. On the trip, the captain's birthday is to be celebrated, and the devious executive officer has arranged for a helicopter to rendezvous and disembark a band and some caterers with food, including a cake containing a Playboy Playmate. The people on the helicopter turn out to be a gang of villains, who take over the ship, and their leader, a disaffected CIA man, makes demands of the Navy in the Pentagon. Meanwhile, the one possible means by which the situation may be saved is the captain's personal chef, Chief Petty Officer Casey Ryback, played by Seagal, who had been locked in a freezer on the lower deck. Unbeknown to the criminal executive officer, Ryback is a former Navy SEAL with extensive anti-terrorist skills. He escapes and after accidentally taking the Playmate in tow, starts off on a mission to recover the ship, killing any of the terrorists he comes across, and by means of some cunning radio modifications contacts the admirals back in the Pentagon. Some of the time the Missouri plays itself, and it is genuinely awe-inspiring when seen at sea. Although the museum ship USS Alabama stands in for it for much of the movie, even in the climax involving the 16-inch guns in the forward turret. These guns had been last fired in anger during Operation Desert Storm back in 1991. The film is said to be Die Hard on a ship. It was not previewed for the critics, usually a sign of impending disaster, but it turned in respectable returns and was nominated for 2 technical Oscars. So if you like that sort of outing at all, it is well worth a watch. The next film is Smokin' Aces from 2006, written and directed by Joe Carnahan. I have become a bit of a fan of Joe Carnahan. When you see his name, you know you're in for something at least a bit unusual. Smokin' Aces tells the tale of a Las Vegas magician, Buddy Israel, played by Jeremy Piven, who knows a bit about the mafia and has agreed to spill the beans. Therefore is in witness protection in a hotel on Lake Tahoe, with a phalanx of bodyguards, a lot of cocaine and some prostitutes. A mafia boss puts a bounty of $1 million on his head, which motivates a number of assassins to take up the challenge. They all make their way towards the hotel, sometimes dispatching each other rather than the target. Meanwhile, the FBI hear about the bounty, and a couple of agents, played by Ryan Reynolds and Ray Liotta, speed to the hotel to attempt to protect the witness. So the scene is set for mayhem. My favourite assassins are Georgia and Charisse, played by Alicia Keys and Taraji P. Henson. The former goes into the hotel with handguns hidden about her person, and the latter guards her with a sniper rifle from an adjacent building. At one point, Georgia is waiting for a lift when the doors open, and inside are 3 manic killers known as the Tremors, armed with unlikely weapons. "I'm going down," she says. "I'll bet you are," says one of the Tremors. Perhaps it's just me, but I thought it was very funny. As the film progresses, things get more and more weird, and FBI briefings take place to keep us up to date with the backstory. As the agents make their way up the building, they are targeted by Charisse, the sniper, as she tries to protect Georgia. They end up on their faces with bullets ricocheting around them. The film was generally disliked by the critics, but it made twice its estimated production cost on its first weekend. It is also noteworthy as apparently being one of Terrence Malick's favourite films of all time. Terrence Malick, don't get me started. We move on to my absolute favourite shoot-'em-up, Dredd from 2012. Dredd is the second time Judge Dredd, arresting officer, judge and executioner in a future mega city, has been portrayed on screen. He is the principal character in the British comic 2000 AD. Back in the 1980s, my eldest son was a subscriber, and I used to consume it with almost as much enthusiasm as he did. The first film version, Judge Dredd, starred Sylvester Stallone, and even though I quite liked it, it was not popular, and much to the distress of the followers of the character, Dredd took his helmet off. The 2012 version stars Carl Urban as Dredd and Olivia Thirlby as a trainee Judge Anderson who has telepathic capabilities. In the opening scenes, we see Dredd at work as well as the effects of an addictive drug later to be important to the plot. Then he and Anderson are assigned the task of subduing a criminal gang in Peachtrees, a massive, supersized tower block controlled by Mama, a female gang overlord played by Lena Headey. Once the judges are within the facility, she has it shut down, and then announces that she will reward anyone who can terminate them. The judges capture one of her henchmen, and with him in tow, they decide they will continue upwards in the building, fighting their way through the assembled assailants on the way. This is absolutely terrific stuff, full of striking action sequences and smart dialogue. Typically when Dredd and Anderson are standing outside Peachtrees, with their handguns drawn, ready to enter the combat zone, the following: Dredd: "Are you ready?" Anderson: "Yes." Dredd: "You don't look ready." The film has developed a cult following, and there has been much lobbying for a sequel, but it was not a financial success, and so even now there seems to be only the faintest possibility of a return of the Drudge to the screen. Karl Urban blames poor marketing for the problem, but no matter. If you had not seen it, seek it out. Dredd does not take his helmet off. Finally, we move on to Everly, directed by Joe Lynch from 2014. This film received an extremely limited release and was available on video in 2015. It features Salma Hayek in the title role, a woman who has been held in an apartment in an unnamed city as well as a sex slave for 4 years, and who has a daughter being looked after by her mother outside. Possibly because he suspects her of being a police informer, her master, a Yakuza boss, sets his gang onto her with the intention that she be raped and killed. The rape takes place, actually off screen, but she is able to retreat to the bathroom of the apartment in her underwear and recover a handgun from the lavatory cistern. She returns to the living room and shoots most of the gang, giving her access to a variety of automatic weapons. But this is only the start of her troubles, as further groups are sent in her direction. In order to protect her mother and daughter, they are induced to enter the apartment as well, and one way or another they become pawns in the combat. Later, a man known as the Sadist arrives with a couple of strange cohorts and ties her up. But she escapes and forces him to drink acid, which results in his death. There is an injured young man left over from the first attack, sitting in her settee throughout, who serves as a support for what Everly is doing, and for whom we feel a little sympathy. While it is all going on, her former lover, Tycho, is watching from a window across the street, and he must eventually confront Everly himself. So obviously this is pretty strange stuff and might not be for everybody, but we're talking about shoot-'em-ups here. Indeed, there is one film actually called Shoot 'em Up, starring Clive Owen. I didn't like it, but I'm not sure why. So that's it for this podcast. I've chosen these 5 from the 25 I have reviewed on my website, so there are another 20 to check out. We are all still in lockdown due to the COVID-19 virus, and out there things are pretty bleak for older people who catch the infection. So follow the rules in place, which are intended to make sure we remain alive. Thanks for listening, and keep safe.